So what does it really take to power one of the fastest-growing economies on the entire planet? Well, today, we're going to dive deep into the 2025 annual report of GE Vernova T&D India. Why? Because they are right at the epicenter of building the future of power in India. You know, it all really boils down to this single massive question. It's not just about, keeping the lights on anymore. No way. We're talking about fueling incredible economic growth, connecting hundreds of millions of people to a modern grid, and, oh yeah, doing it all sustainably. That is the challenge. And just to really wrap your head around the scale of this, you just have to look at the numbers. India's demand for electricity, it's absolutely surging. We're looking at a GDP projected to grow at 6.5%, and electricity demand is right there with it, expected to keep pace at 6% every single year. So you see, this isn't just a simple upgrade. It's a complete reimagining of an entire nation's energy backbone.
So, this all sets up what's known as an energy trilemma. Think of it like this. It's this incredibly delicate balancing act. On one hand, you have to meet explosive growth in demand. On the other, you have to rapidly shift to green, renewable energy. And then, the third part, and this is absolutely crucial, you've got to make sure the entire system is stable and reliable.
All right, just let this number sink in for a second. 250 gigawatts. That was India's record-breaking peak power demand just last year. I mean, a figure that massive puts an unbelievable amount of pressure on the existing infrastructure. It basically screams for the need for a bigger, stronger, and way smarter grid. And the goals? Well, they are incredibly ambitious. I mean, India is aiming to nearly double its power capacity by 2030. And get this, a staggering 500 gigawatts of that new capacity is going to come from renewables. To make all this happen, there's a planned investment of 9.2 trillion rupees just in the grid itself. That's about $108 billion US. Wow.
Okay, so who is actually on the ground building the grid that's capable of handling this kind of transformation? Well, that brings us right to the key player at the very heart of all this.
And here they are, GE Vernova T&D India. These are the folks who are manufacturing and installing the heavy-duty, high-voltage equipment that forms the literal backbone of the country's transmission and distribution network. Simply put, they build the hardware that makes a modern grid actually work.
And listen, these guys have some seriously deep roots. As their chairman, Ratan Basu, points out, they've been at this for a long time. We're talking since 1957. They were the ones who pioneered localizing that super high-voltage 765 kilovolts AC technology right here in India. They've been a central part of the country's power story for over 65 years. All right, so we've laid out the challenge and we've met the key player. So now, let's get into the solution. What's the actual physical technology you need to build a grid that's ready for the 21st century? Okay, this right here, this is basically the toolkit for building a modern grid. And it's not just about the heavy-duty hardware, the massive transformers and circuit breakers. It's also about the brains of the operation, the digital software and advanced systems that manage the flow of power super efficiently. We're talking things like HVDC systems, and we'll get to those in just a sec. And what's really crucial here? This technology is being built in India. The company runs 5 state-of-the-art manufacturing facilities all across the country. We're talking places like Vadodara, Chennai, and Noida. And this, of course, aligns perfectly with the government's Make in India initiative, localizing the production of this absolutely critical infrastructure. So remember that green part of the trilemma we talked about? Well, here's exactly how they're tackling it. See, a lot of today's high-voltage equipment uses a gas called SF6, which is a really potent greenhouse gas. But GE Vernova's G3 technology is a groundbreaking alternative that cuts those CO2 equivalent emissions by, wait for it, 99%. That's a total game changer for decarbonizing the grid itself. And remember I mentioned HVDC? Let's talk about that. The absolute best way to think about it is like a superhighway for electricity, right? So imagine you've got these massive solar farms way out in a remote desert, or huge wind farms offshore. You need a way to get all that power to the cities hundreds of miles away without losing a ton of it along the way. Well, that's exactly what HVDC is. Okay, so the strategy is crystal clear. But the big question is it actually working? Well, let's take a look at the numbers from their latest annual report, because believe me, they tell a pretty powerful story. First up, let's talk order bookings. They didn't just grow, they more than doubled. We're talking a 102% increase year over year. That is a massive jump, and it's the clearest sign you can get that demand for these grid solutions is just exploding, both in India and all around the world.
And here's the thing, they're delivering on those orders. Revenue was up a solid 35% for the year, and that shows you they're not just booking orders and letting them sit there, they are executing, turning that backlog into real projects and, of course, real financial results.
And this is where it hits the bottom line. Their profit before tax, which is, a really key measure of a company's financial health, it grew by more than 3 times, 3.1x to be exact. Let that sink in. This isn't just growth, this is highly profitable growth, and that's a huge sign of strong operational efficiency.
And here's where the story gets even bigger, expanding globally. While 70% of their orders are for India's own massive transformation, a full 30% are actually for exports. Think about what that means. India is becoming a manufacturing hub for this kind of advanced grid technology, shipping it out to countries like France, the USA, Australia, and Spain.
And maybe the most important number of all? Zero, as in zero debt. The company is completely debt-free. In a world that's all about massive capital investment and, let's be honest, a lot of economic uncertainty, this kind of financial stability provides an absolutely rock-solid foundation for all their future growth.
Okay, so let's tie all of this together. What does it all mean for the bigger picture? Because this is about so much more than just one company's success story.
The managing director and CEO, Sandeep Sanzaria, he really puts it perfectly. He says they're actively shaping the future by building a grid that isn't just bigger, but one that's also smarter, stronger, and cleaner.
And this right here is where it all comes full circle. Those impressive numbers we looked at, they represent something so much more profound. They represent the incredible engineering that allows 1.4 billion people to grow their economy, to hit those ambitious climate goals, and, at the end of the day, to have a reliable supply of power every single day.
So the real takeaway here is this. India is in the middle of one of the largest and fastest energy transitions in history. The technology is here, the investment is flowing, and the grid of tomorrow is literally being built today. And as this new model for powering a nation starts to take shape, it poses a much, much larger question for all of us, doesn't it?